Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tearing down that comforting facade of well-kept suburban neighborhoods. We usually associate sprawling lawns, quiet streets, and brightly lit houses with ultimate security. But the source material we're analyzing today reveals a terrifying reality hiding just out of sight. Let's dive into this and explore 3 incredibly unsettling true stories that prove suburban tranquility is not always what it seems.
Which brings us to a seriously terrifying question. What actually happens when your ultimate safe haven is breached? We all lock our doors at night, we recognize our neighbors' cars, and we go to sleep assuming that the boundaries of our property will keep the unpredictable chaos of the outside world at bay. But as the accounts we're about to explain show, locked doors and familiar faces can often just be a comforting illusion.
Let's start with Case 1, the missing knives, a weekend alone that goes completely wrong.
So, our first account comes from a 17-year-old guy whose notoriously strict parents left him home alone for the weekend for the very first time. Naturally, taking advantage of this rare freedom, he and his girlfriend, MJ, decide to go skinny dipping in the family's heated backyard pool. From out there in the dark yard, they had this perfect view right through the large bay windows into the brightly lit living room. He actually described it as looking into a lit-up dollhouse. Floating there in the warm water, they felt absolutely, completely safe. Well, until our protagonist glanced at the far living room wall and just froze. There was a distinct, moving shadow in there. Someone else was in the house.
Panicking, but really trying to keep a level head, he hides MJ in the dark pool house, grabs a knife from the kitchen, and decides to search the house himself. But he doesn't find your typical smash-and-grab burglar. Instead, he finds these incredibly bizarre, unsettling little clues. A slightly pulled-out dining chair, almost like someone had just been sitting there. A crooked picture frame, an unused coffee mug just left out on the counter. Guys, this wasn't a rushed robbery. These were methodical signs of an intruder just taking their time, doing things no rational robber would ever waste time doing.
The terror just built slowly as the night dragged on. By 11:30 p.m., the terrified teen had called the police. They searched the whole house, the yard, but found absolutely nothing. No forced entry, no footprints, literally no intruder. Convinced he might have just scared the guy off, the police leave, and the teens barricade themselves in a downstairs bedroom. But the true horror hits at 4 a.m. He's jolted awake by the unmistakable sound of creaking floorboards right above him, and then footsteps slowly making their way down the stairs.
He bolts out of the room, knife in hand, only to find the front door wide open and the intruder gone into the night. But the most disturbing part of this account isn't the break-in itself, it's the discovery they made the next morning. Now, the intruder did take some random cash and electronics, sure, but the truly terrifying realization was that every single kitchen knife was gone. The intruder had methodically stolen all of them. It felt like this silent, horrifying message left behind by someone who had been watching them the entire time.
Moving on to Case 2, the dorm intruder, a Holly Bash nightmare.
For this one, we're shifting from a private home to Rowan University in New Jersey, right in the middle of a massive campus-wide spring festival called Holly Bash. Unbeknownst to the students, an unprecedented threat was actually looming. Earlier that evening, around 12:30 a.m., reports started surfacing online of a group of at least 10 masked individuals riding bikes and just aggressively banging on campus doors. Well, our protagonist, a sophomore who was entirely unaware of these warnings, was simply walking back to his dorm alone at 2:30 a.m., completely oblivious that his safe haven had already been compromised.
He swipes his card and walks into Chestnut Hall. As he heads toward the stairs, he spots someone sitting in the dorm lounge. Now, students hanging out in a lounge at 2:30 a.m. isn't exactly unusual, right? But this person wasn't a typical student. He was wearing a full-on black ski mask, and he was dead silent. The intruder just sat there, staring at him. And then, in one terrifying motion, the masked figure jumps off the couch and turns directly toward the student.
He immediately bolts down the hall and locks himself in a bathroom for 5 agonizing minutes until everything goes quiet. Thinking the coast is clear, he sneaks as quietly as he can toward the building's alternate exit. But as he gets to the other door, the trap closes. The exact same masked man was waiting for him. The intruder had actually moved his bike to block the exit and wedged a chair against the doorframe, deliberately cutting off the escape route and essentially daring the student to walk past. Gripping his pepper spray, the student practically forces himself to walk right past this completely motionless figure.
He manages to push through the door and escapes into the night, but the ordeal is definitely not over. As he's hurrying toward another dorm, he hears the sound of bikes creeping up behind him. 3 more masked individuals ride up right alongside him, and they're heckling him, laughing, and most terrifyingly of all, brandishing what actually appeared to be firearms. They trailed him, staying just out of arm's reach, using pure psychological terror until he finally made it to his friend's dorm.
Which brings us to our final account. Case 3, The Party Crasher, an end-of-summer bash.
This story takes place during a really chaotic end-of-summer party for camp counselors. It was hosted by a girl named Amanda in her wealthy 3-story suburban home while her parents were out of town. The house was packed, the music was blaring. Our protagonist, who was Amanda's boyfriend at the time, needed a break from the noise after successfully plotting to get this flirty rival named Pete drunk. So he steps out onto the quiet driveway to look at the stars, get some fresh air. But the peace is entirely shattered when he notices a motionless figure standing at the very edge of the property, just barely illuminated by a dim street lamp. Emboldened by a little bit of liquid courage, he actually decides to approach this silent stranger.
He asks the man if he needs any help. The stranger takes a few slow steps forward, still mostly hidden in the dark, and completely ignores the greeting. Instead, he asks this highly suspicious question. Are your parents home? And you want to know the truly unsettling part? The stranger actually name-dropped Amanda's parents when he asked it. Recognizing something was deeply, deeply wrong, the protagonist lies and says they're inside. The stranger simply nods, turns around, and vanishes into the darkness down the street.
The protagonist tries to brush off the weird encounter and heads back inside. At this point, 2 completely different worlds were existing simultaneously in this house. Down in the basement, it was loud, crowded, and everyone's totally distracted by this intense ping-pong game. But the protagonist suddenly remembers hearing the front doorbell ring earlier, which was weird because everyone was instructed to strictly use the back door. Following his gut, he sneaks upstairs. And there lay the second world, the master bedroom. It was dead silent, completely ransacked, with empty jewelry boxes scattered everywhere.
So how on earth did an intruder get past a house absolutely full of people? Well, our protagonist found the answer in a belligerently drunk guest named Bella. When he confronts her, she casually slurs that some old guy at the door claimed to be a family friend. The protagonist, totally horrified, screams back, "You let him in?" While the party was raging downstairs, Bella had literally opened the front door and let the stranger from the street lamp walk right past her and head straight upstairs. Running back to the parents' bedroom to assess the damage, the protagonist assumes the thief had already fled. But suddenly, he notices a shift in the mirror on the back of the door. Before he can even react, he's violently tackled from behind. The intruder completely knocks the wind out of him, just clawing frantically at his shirt. In a burst of pure adrenaline and panic, the protagonist shoves the man off. The intruder instantly scrambles up, dives straight through an open second-story window, lands on the roof with a heavy thud, and just disappears into the side yard.
And that brings us to the lingering aftermath and all the unanswered questions.
In all 3 of these accounts, the immediate physical danger eventually passed, right? The police were called, doors were locked, and the sun eventually came up. But the true horror lies in the psychological aftermath. It's the permanent shattering of that suburban illusion we talked about at the very beginning. The real source of dread comes from the terrifying mysteries that remain entirely unsolved to this day. In Case 1, where exactly was that knife-stealing intruder hiding inside the house while the police conducted a thorough search? In Case 2, how did a coordinated group of masked, armed, non-students seamlessly breach a secured college dorm? And in Case 3, how did the stranger by the street lamp know precisely who Amanda's parents were and that they were out of town?
So the crucial takeaway from dissecting these accounts is that safety is often just a matter of perspective. These sources are a stark reminder that our homes, our dorms, our quiet streets, they can all be breached by the unpredictable. It leaves us with one final haunting thought. When the danger vanishes into the night, do you ever truly feel safe again? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep your doors locked, and as always,